Welcome to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley Moore and Rosa Horsley. Today we discuss the Tuskegee Experiment. Our goal and hope is to inform and start conversation.
When I first heard of Tuskegee, I really didn't know much about the topic at all. And I asked my husband if he had ever heard of Tuskegee, and he's like, yeah, they're airmen. So he had a head start more so than I did. History is not my strong suit, obviously. So it was a very interesting research topic that I think has opened my eyes up a little bit more into understanding why certain people feel a certain way about healthcare and healthcare providers. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on. And as the whole topic unfolds, you'll understand.
Absolutely. So the reason why, I was like, oh, this is a great topic, this, that, and the third, and why I think it's relevant today, we've talked about it before, was the lack of understanding as to why maybe certain demographics are so hesitant in volunteering themselves for clinical trials, or why people are so apprehensive maybe to receive the COVID vaccination. So our hope and goal and thought process in doing this particular topic was to maybe show some light on to the reasoning why that may be.
So to jump right into this episode, this is about the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. Now, that is probably going to make some people cringe, but that was the official title of the study that we're going to talk about today. The name has been updated, and it's now called the USPHS Syphilis Study at Tuskegee. It's probably a little bit more gentle to the ears. And it is a mouthful, but throughout the podcast, this is just going to be referred to as either Tuskegee or the Tuskegee Experiment, which is not politically correct, but it is a lot easier to say. And I can see why the name was changed, but the reason I put the original name is because I want people to understand that this study was specifically for African American males.
Well, not only that, I think by putting in the fact that you're naming the original study, people can go and do the research on their own. Yes. Not what's been updated to be politically correct.
Yes.
So kudos to us for doing that.
To give a little background, there were about 1,000 men that were screened at the Tuskegee University. And of those screened, 399 of those were found to have latent or asymptomatic syphilis. So these men were not given syphilis, they already had syphilis. This was found on a screening.
Mm-hmm.
There were a total of 600 men in the study, obviously the 399 with the syphilis and the 201 without. These men, for the most part, were poor. They were typically illiterate. They were sharecroppers. They were farmers. They were your country boys, kind of. They participated in the study because they were told they would get free medical care, and not just free for the study, like all of their medical care would be free. They would get help with transportation to and from clinics, which that's huge. Burial stipends. When they died, they would get survivors insurance that their spouses would get. And I mean, if you think about African American men in the 1930s, that was like, I'm living the life here. Like,
yeah, this is a dream come true. Like they weren't getting this before. They were going untreated for just their regular ailments, let's say blood pressure, diabetes, what have you, glaucoma. So they might have had these issues before, and now they're being told, hey, if you join this study, we're going to give you this, 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 and this, all at no cost. Mm-hmm. It's like one of those infomercials. Yep. If you join now, or if you order now, we'll send you the second one absolutely free, minus the shipping and handling. So it's like one of those situations. They were handed, like, if you do this now, you'll get this, and this free. How could you say no to that?
Exactly. And it's interesting because these men did not know they had syphilis, and they were not told that they had syphilis, which is a issue in itself that we will get into later.
Mm-hmm.
And they were told that they had bad blood, like, quote, bad blood. And that was used to describe so many different things in the 1930s. I mean, from anything as simple as fatigue up to things as serious as syphilis, and anything in between, like anemia, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when the study first started in 1932, there were no proven treatments for syphilis. We didn't know how to treat it. It wasn't until 1947 that penicillin became the standard treatment for the disease. So, what is that? 15 years later?
Yes.
So, 15 years you have of data on how untreated syphilis, affects a person, specifically African American males.
Mm-hmm.
But the researchers still didn't tell the patients, the 399 men that had syphilis, that hey, you have syphilis and there's a treatment for it. No, they just let them keep on trucking along. And that study lasted until 1972.
Well, not only did they not tell them, but they didn't even treat it.
No, they did not.
So not only, so you have to remember, and we'll go into this in a second. So like, not only did they have syphilis, whomever their partners in life were also had it, and they were untreated. So,
and their children, if they had
and
children.
their children, absolutely. So as the nurses that we are, we may know what syphilis is, but a lot of people don't. And
Yeah.
syphilis is a sexually transmitted infection, which does start out asymptomatic. A lot of people don't know they have it, and it worsens over time when it's not treated. So there are 4 stages. The first one's the primary stage, and it's usually shown with small sores, and it occurs where the infection enters the body. And this sore is called a canker, and it is typically painless and goes away in 3 to 6 weeks all on its own. And you may not even notice that you have it.
Mm-hmm.
The secondary stage is once that canker heals, you can develop a rash that starts on your trunk, which is like your chest area, and can eventually cover your entire body. And there are also wart-like sores that appear in the mouth and genitalia. And so you can develop a sore throat, swollen lymph nodes, fever, body aches. You can even lose your hair. And this phenomenon can occur for up to a year on and off. So the third stage is the latent stage, and this is where there are no symptoms and a person can stay this way for years.
And this is where the men were who were involved in the clinical research trial. They were in the latent stages, so they had no symptoms.
So the last stage is where 15 to 30% of the untreated patients develop complications that can affect the brain, the nerves, the eyes, the heart, the blood vessels, joints, bones, and liver. So that's when you're on that stage, the 4th stage, I mean, it can wreak havoc. Like I remember having a resident who was undiagnosed, and it caused significant cognitive impairment.
Yes.
Oh, it was so bad. She had an episode where she was in the hospital, she was unconscious, she was on life support, like the whole 9 yards, because she didn't know she had it, and it went untreated for years. So the important information that you need to know is that syphilis can spread and cause damage to your eyes, which can lead to visual changes and even blindness. It can spread to your nervous system and brain, which is neurosyphilis, which can lead to paralysis, dementia, numbness, and severe headaches. This is where I was telling you about that resident. Like that's where she was. She was in that category right there. Any children born with syphilis typically have no symptoms. There's deafness, teeth deformities, and saddle nose. And that's where the bridge of your nose collapses and can develop later on in childhood. However, babies born with syphilis can also be born prematurely, and we all know that can be fatal.
Yep.
So now that you do understand that not only did men not know that they had syphilis, neither did their partners or their children. And it wasn't until 1972 where a couple of reporters brought this to light that nothing had been done.
Mm-hmm.
And so by then, dozens of men had died and countless had been infected.
And so, I mean, it opened your eyes that you have hundreds of men that have a disease. And from 1947, we now have a standard, and penicillin cures syphilis.
And it's crazy because even then, we have to realize now, penicillin isn't expensive.
No.
It's a very easy medication to make, very, inexpensive. Even today on the dollar, it's super inexpensive. It's still one of the best ways, not only to treat syphilis, but a lot of other disorders.
Mm-hmm.
The unfortunate part of that, as nurses, we know that a lot of people will list penicillin as an allergy when they have GI upset, diarrhea, constipation, nausea, and or vomiting. But as nurses, we know that those are side effects and not allergic reactions. When we think allergic reactions, we're thinking anaphylaxis, we're thinking swelling, hives, rashes. So even to this day, people can technically take penicillin, which cures a lot, and we still don't.
That's why we ask, well, what was your reaction to this medicine? Because some, things that aren't necessarily allergic reaction, but they can be pretty severe adverse effects. We may not give it to you, but that's why nurses are so nosy, is because we want to know what happened. Because if it's a life or death situation, do we need to give you some Benadryl and push this penicillin, or do we need to go to plan B? I did find within in my research, because this is a rabbit hole to go down, and the amount of references that I have read and will link is pretty lengthy, just because I like to have a good understanding, and I don't want to get my information from one source because that's never very reliable.
No.
But while I was researching Tuskegee, I did find other unethical research that has been done. So Tuskegee is a big one that a lot of people know about, but this research, it really does just kind of crush your soul to think that there are people out there who knowingly participate in these. And I'm not talking about the patients. I'm talking about the researchers and the healthcare professionals that are conducting and help conduct the research. It was an article that was published by the NIH, and there is a reference to this as a, quote, prestigious U.S. university that recruited African American boys into a study regarding aggressive behavior. And these kids were not allowed to drink. They had to have hourly lab work. They were taken off their medicines. Didn't matter what kind of medicines, like asthma medicines, everything. They stopped their medicines and were given another medication that we suspected would increase aggressiveness. And this study was marketed specifically to African American boys. And so the first thing I thought of was, where's their parents? Like, these are children. So the first thing I thought of was, where's their parents? No, they convinced their parents to sign their children up for money for this study, and we're kind of like, okay, you sit over there, we're going to work over here with your kid. So you can think of what demographic of people would say, I'm willing to put my child in experiment for money.
Well, obviously, someone who needed it.
Right. It's going to be your lower class,
socio-economical, class of people.
Yep. Because you tell me that now, I'm like, I don't need the money. I'm not putting my kid through that. So just to kind of give you some forethought there. And my personal opinion is, the informed consent went out of the window. And most parents, even if they needed the money, would not have agreed to tell you you can withhold medicines that your child takes that could possibly save their life and give them medicine that would possibly increase aggressiveness. Like, there I don't know, I mean, maybe a parent that's like a drug addict that does not care about their kid would do this, but most parents would not do this.
It makes me question, this social demographic that we're talking about, and I don't know what year, this particular study was done, but I think we have to give the parents some benefit of the doubt. How illiterate or literate are they? How educated are they? What doctor promised them this? What doctor told them that, this was harmless, that this
Mhm.
was just, what I mean? There's so
Right.
many factors that, are unaccounted here as
Mhm.
to why a parent would even consider this. But I can tell you, things are hard now, financially now.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine whenever this study was done, how things were economically unstable for some of these parents back then. And I'm not saying, like, I wouldn't do this, probably not then or now, but I don't want to cast judgment on anybody that participated in the study,
No.
because we don't know what they were told or how they were enticed. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Well, and that's the thing is,
Like,
just
even
kind of
with the
using.
Tuskegee, they
Right.
were they were promised all these things,
Yeah.
like, if you do this, you'll get this, and that. They were selling them a dream. Who's to say that, that wasn't the case in this particular study as well?
Right. And the thing of it is, though, same concept where did they really actually give informed consent? Do they really have
Correct.
informed consent? And that's the biggest thing is, the Tuskegee experiment happened in the 1930s. And although that wasn't really a long time ago, I mean, was that 90 years ago?
Mhm.
You know, those men can still be alive today. They'd
Yeah,
be a
there
little
still are
old, but
some.
their
Mhm.
children are still alive today for sure. And this study was in the 1990s.
Wow. Yeah,
In
there's no
the 90s.
excuse.
Like, at that point.
Everybody
Mm-mm.
knows about informed consent by now in
Yes.
1990s.
Yeah, this wasn't in the 40s or the 50s or even during the 60s where we were starting, to have our civil rights movement. No, 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 this was in the 90s.
It's crazy to me. And this is just one episode.
Yeah, oh,
But
yeah.
it's just crazy to me how, doctors and medical professionals promise to do no harm. But I guess some of their eyes, if you don't, it's like, don't ask, don't tell.
Or, oh, the benefit of more people, outweighs
Yeah,
the risk of.
outweighs the risk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I would say during this research, I did come across a lady named Harriet A. Washington. And I would encourage anybody that has any interest in learning about why some of the African American community has trust issues with our government or healthcare research. She is a wealth of knowledge and has several books that are specifically based on this. Now, I don't want to go out there and say that every African American has trust issues with the government and or
No.
our healthcare research because that's
Hell,
absolutely
I do.
not true.
And I'm a nurse.
You know, and so yeah, I mean, at that point, I'm like, I've said it before on this podcast. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, does our government really have our best interests? No, they don't care about me individually. They do not. Sorry, no. Um, and so I get that completely, but this really did make me go, hmm. Not only was it just the government, because our government's done some shady stuff. I mean, I'm sure every government has. I just
Yeah.
haven't researched every government in the world, but I know that our government has done some shady stuff. Um, and not just to African Americans, but to any denomination, whoever was enlisted in the military at the time, is
Absolutely.
kind of the way that went. And so I don't want to group anybody together, but if you have questions about why it's hard to find certain research, because I know that when I tried to research cataracts and glaucoma for African Americans, the amount of information was so limited to African Americans, although they're at the greatest risk.
Well, and this is one of those reasons, why minorities are underrepresented in clinical studies. And like you said, it's just not African Americans, it's all minorities that I feel that are underrepresented.
Yes.
And it's due to mistrust. There's definitely barriers that are in place. And, it's no surprise that we're talking about it. I mean, we should be talking about it even more instead of trying to rewrite or change history to be more politically correct. Things get lost in translation.
Well, and that's why, I know some people will probably be very offended by the official title of this experiment when it first came out. But I'd rather you be educated and a little offended than for me just to throw out the one that's right now politically correct and
Mhm.
you not be able to find the right information because you're not searching for the right thing.
I'm hoping that in the future there will be a lot more ethical transparency
Yes.
because we do need to have more clinical research based, with minority help. Like without
Yes.
us stepping up and becoming parts of clinical trials and clinical research, we're not going to have the best medicine. We're
No.
not going to have the best options to the best cures because we're not represented. And I'm hoping that, since COVID and disparities and all of this has been brought to the forefront, that for the future of medicine and for the future of minorities, that we are also able to receive the best medical care as well.
Absolutely, because we don't want any more lives to be lost because of lack of research, because of the mistrust that that the healthcare and government have created.
Hmm.
Um, but without that information, like you said, we just don't have the best information,
Hmm.
and you
So
can't get the best care.
how can you offer the best treatment if you don't even have the best information?
Exactly.
So you can find our references on our website, thenursingpostpodcast.com, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Please share your thoughts and your comments. We love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening to The Nursing Post.